While everyone's watching their retirement accounts, wondering if they should stay the course, the people who actually run this world are liquidating positions, moving capital into hard assets, and preparing for the largest wealth transfer in modern history. You think this is fear-mongering? It's not. It's pattern recognition. And the fact that you've been trained to dismiss this as conspiracy theory is precisely why you're still poor. Let me be direct. Your stability is a fabrication. That career you've spent 15 years building, that diversified portfolio your advisor assembled, that real estate equity you're so proud of, all of it exists within a system designed by people who will not hesitate to pull the rug when it serves their interests. You've been taught that patience and prudence create wealth. They don't. They create reliable workers and predictable consumers. Wealth is created through asymmetric bets during moments of maximum uncertainty, and we're entering the most uncertain period since the 1940s. The difference is, this time the chaos isn't accidental. It's architectural. Every institution you've been conditioned to trust is showing structural fractures. The banking system required $250 billion in emergency liquidity last spring, and the headlines called it routine measures. Routine, the currency you're paid in, has lost 97% of its purchasing power in a century, but you're told inflation is transitory, even as your grocery bill proves otherwise. The social contract that promised security in exchange for compliance is being rewritten in real time, and the new terms are not in your favor. But here's what they won't tell you on the evening news. This isn't a bug in the system. This is the system working exactly as designed. Chaos is the mechanism through which power consolidates. Always has been. Look at every major wealth event in the past century: the Great Depression, the stagflation of the 70s, the dot-com collapse, the 2008 financial crisis, the COVID lockdowns. What happened? The herd lost everything. The architects bought everything. In 2008, while middle-class families were losing homes they'd spent decades paying for, private equity firms backed by the same banks that caused the crisis were acquiring entire neighborhoods at 30 cents on the dollar. Those assets are now worth triple. The people who lost their homes are now renting them back at prices they can barely afford. This is not unfortunate. This is not an accident. This is the most predictable transfer mechanism in existence. And it's about to happen again on a scale that will make 2008 look like practice. You've been installed with a morality system that makes you complicit in your own exploitation. Work hard, be patient. Don't rock the boat, play by the rules. These aren't virtues, they're compliance mechanisms. The same people who tell you to invest for the long term are the ones who trade on insider information and liquidate positions before announcing layoffs. The same institutions that lecture about stakeholder capitalism are the ones engineering the conditions that will wipe out the middle class. And you've been so thoroughly conditioned that when someone points this out, your first instinct is to defend the system that's extracting from you. That's not morality. That's Stockholm Syndrome with a 401k. The herd operates on consensus. Consensus is always late because it requires enough data points that even the slowest pattern recognition systems can detect the trend. By the time something becomes consensus, the asymmetric opportunity is gone. The herd bought real estate in 2006 because everyone agreed it only goes up. The herd bought tech stocks in 1999 because everyone agreed the internet changed everything. The herd is right now being told that cash is trash and you can't time the market, while the people giving that advice are moving into positions that benefit from the coming liquidation. Consensus is not wisdom. Consensus is the sound of sheep agreeing on which direction to walk toward the slaughterhouse. Your peer group will actively sabotage your ascent, not because they're evil, but because your success threatens their narrative. If you succeed by breaking the rules they've followed religiously, it means they've wasted their lives on a lie. They can't allow that, so they'll shame you. They'll call you reckless, unethical, greedy. They'll invoke fairness and responsibility and all the other rhetorical weapons that keep people in their place. This is the crab bucket mentality operating at the social level. The moment you try to climb out, the other crabs will pull you back down, not because they want you to suffer, but because they can't tolerate the cognitive dissonance of watching you escape while they remain trapped. Your ambition is a mirror that shows them their cowardice. They will not forgive you for that. Modern society has optimized for creating what Nietzsche called the last man, the person who wants nothing except comfort and entertainment, who has no higher purpose than avoiding discomfort, who believes that happiness is the highest good and that happiness means the absence of struggle. You see this everywhere. The obsession with work-life balance, the celebration of self-care as a virtue, the idea that you deserve comfort simply for existing. This is not enlightenment. This is domestication. You're being turned into a creature that seeks pleasure and avoids pain, that values security over growth, that would rather be comfortable than powerful. And the beautiful part from the perspective of those who benefit from your passivity is that you police yourself. You've internalized the values that keep you weak, and you experience guilt when you violate them. You've been conditioned to fear chaos because chaos is when the rules break down, and you've spent your entire life learning the rules, following the rules, being rewarded for rule compliance. The prospect of a world without rules is terrifying to you because your entire identity is built on being good at following them. But here's what you haven't realized. The rules were never real. They're a game the powerful allow you to play so you feel like you have agency. When the rules stop serving their interests, they change them. They did it in 2008 when they decided certain banks were too big to fail. They did it in 2020 when they printed more money in 6 months than existed in the previous century. They'll do it again, and you'll comply because you always do. The people who built this system are not afraid of chaos. They engineer it. They create the conditions for collapse. They position themselves to benefit from the collapse, and then they buy the assets the herd panic sells at liquidation prices. This has happened so many times it's not even a conspiracy theory anymore. It's documented history, and it's about to happen again. The question is not whether chaos is coming. The question is whether you're going to be the person losing everything or the person acquiring everything. That decision is being made right now in how you interpret what I'm telling you. The herd will dismiss this as cynical or immoral. The architects will recognize it as accurate and position accordingly. The moment you decide to weaponize chaos instead of becoming its victim, you enter a different reality. Not a better reality in the moral sense the herd clings to, but a reality where power concentrates in your hands instead of draining away from them. Let me be explicit about what this requires because most of you will fail at this exact juncture. You will understand intellectually but remain paralyzed emotionally. You will see the opportunity, but your domesticated instincts will keep you chained to the herd's value system. Amor Fati. The Romans had this concept. Love your fate, but they meant it passively, like accepting cancer with a smile. That's not what I'm describing. I'm talking about actively loving the coming collapse because you've positioned yourself to extract maximum value from it. When markets panic, when currencies destabilize, when institutions crumble, your first response should be arousal, not fear. The same way a predator's pupils dilate when it spots wounded prey. This is not metaphor. I'm describing the actual psychological state you need to cultivate. The will to power in financial markets operates on a simple principle that everyone knows but nobody wants to say out loud. Chaos liquidates the weak and rewards the ruthless. It's a filtering mechanism. When everything is stable, mediocrity can hide. Average intelligence can coast. Weak hands can hold positions. But when volatility spikes, when uncertainty becomes the only certainty, the system violently separates those who understand power from those who pray for safety. You cannot be in the second category and expect anything except to be consumed. Look at every major wealth transfer in documented history. Not the sanitized version they teach in universities. The actual mechanics of what happened. The Great Depression created more millionaires per capita than the Roaring Twenties. The 2008 financial crisis transferred approximately $4.5 trillion in wealth from the middle class to the top 1% in less than 18 months. COVID lockdowns created 5 new billionaires every week, while small businesses collapsed at rates not seen since the Great Depression. These are not anomalies. This is the pattern. Unprecedented times are wealth transfer mechanisms disguised as natural disasters. The elite playbook during chaos has 4 movements, and you need to internalize all of them because applying 3 out of 4 leaves you exposed. First movement: buy fear and sell greed. This sounds like a bumper sticker, but most of you don't understand what it actually means operationally. When the herd panics, asset prices disconnect from underlying value. Not slightly, catastrophically. March 2020, blue chip stocks trading at 60% discounts. Real estate in 2009 at 40 cents on the dollar in markets that would recover within 36 months. The herd sells at these moments because their nervous system overrides their analysis. They feel the fear and they must act to relieve it. You must be the person buying what they're panic selling, which requires you to have dry powder when everyone else is fully invested, and it requires you to have the psychological conditioning to act when your own nervous system is screaming danger. Second movement: acquire assets the herd panic sells. I'm not talking about catching falling knives on speculative positions. I'm talking about productive assets that generate cash flow. Businesses, real estate, intellectual property, equipment. The things that actually produce wealth rather than just store it. During chaos, the herd liquidates these assets because they need immediate cash or because their lenders force liquidation. The terms available during these moments are obscene. You can acquire assets for 20 to 30% of replacement cost. You can structure deals where the seller finances at below market rates because they're desperate. You can negotiate terms that would be laughed at during stable times. But you can only do this if you're liquid when everyone else is leveraged, and if you're psychologically prepared to be the villain in someone else's story of victimhood. Third movement: build systems while others are paralyzed. Chaos creates voids, institutional voids, market voids, leadership voids. The herd responds to voids with paralysis because uncertainty triggers their risk avoidance mechanisms. This is your window to build infrastructure that would take decades during stable times. You can hire top talent at discounts because the job market collapses. You can negotiate long-term contracts at favorable terms because vendors need certainty. You can establish market position while competitors are in survival mode. The companies that dominate each generation are disproportionately founded or radically expanded during crisis periods. This is not coincidence. This is predation. Fourth movement: position before the narrative shifts. The herd operates on lagging indicators. They see the trend after it's obvious, which means after the asymmetric returns have been extracted. You need to identify where the narrative is going while everyone is still focused on where it's been. This requires understanding that narratives are constructed, not discovered. The elite don't predict the future. They fund it. They invest in the infrastructure that will define the next cycle. Then they shape the narrative that drives capital toward that infrastructure. You're not going to be in the rooms where these decisions are made, but you can observe the capital flows and position ahead of the herd. Becoming what Nietzsche called the Übermensch, the architect of your own values, is not a philosophical exercise. It's a practical requirement for extracting wealth from chaos. When old systems crumble, the values embedded in those systems lose their enforcement mechanisms. The herd continues following rules that no longer serve any purpose except their own subjugation. They wait for permission that's never coming. They seek approval from authorities that no longer exist. They follow procedures that lead nowhere. The architect recognizes that values are tools, not truths. You adopt the values that give you power and discard the values that constrain you. This is what every elite family understands and what they never teach in public schools. The master morality versus slave morality distinction is the key to everything I'm describing. Slave morality says take only what you're given, be grateful for scraps, view ambition as greed, see power as corruption. These values ensure you remain harmless to those above you. Master morality says take what you can acquire, create your own opportunities, view ambition as vitality, see power as responsibility. The herd will call this sociopathy. Let them. Their judgment has no enforcement mechanism unless you grant it one. You need to internalize this at a level below conscious thought. Your empathy is a liability they will exploit. Their calculated self-interest is an advantage you need to replicate. Comment chaos right now if you're ready to stop being a victim of the next collapse and start being a beneficiary. I need to know who's actually processing this versus who's just consuming content. The herd won't understand this message. They'll call it immoral or dangerous or unrealistic. Comment predator if you recognize that morality is a social construct designed to limit your options, and that danger is where asymmetric returns live. Drop your biggest fear about the coming chaos below, and I'll tell you specifically how to weaponize it. Most of you fear losing what you have. That fear will paralyze you into losing everything. Some of you fear missing the opportunity. That fear can be channeled into preparation. Tell me which category you're in. The next 18 months present specific sectors where chaos creates asymmetric opportunity. And you need to understand this with precision, because generalized preparation is worthless. Real estate and secondary markets, where institutional investors over-leveraged on commercial properties. They're facing a refinancing crisis with rates at 20-year highs and occupancy at 20-year lows. Forced liquidations are coming. Distressed debt in the lower middle market, where private equity firms use cheap money to overpay for mediocre businesses. Those loans are maturing into an environment where refinancing is impossible. The lenders will liquidate the collateral at massive discounts. Commodity-adjacent businesses where supply chain chaos created margin compression. The weak operators are failing right now. Their customer lists and equipment will be available for cents on the dollar. Technology infrastructure and AI and energy, where government spending is about to flow regardless of fiscal sanity. Position ahead of the obvious narrative. But here's what stops 95% of you. You have the information. You might even have the capital. What you don't have is the psychological conditioning to act against the herd's emotional state. When everyone around you is panicking, your mirror neurons fire. You feel their fear as your own. When your family questions your decisions, your tribal instincts scream danger. When media amplifies catastrophe, your risk avoidance mechanisms engage. You need to understand that these responses were adaptive in tribal environments, where group consensus meant survival. They are maladaptive in financial markets, where group consensus means your exit liquidity for smarter money. This channel exists for the 1% who refuse to be cattle, not the income 1%, the psychological 1%. The people who can hear what I'm actually saying instead of what their conditioning tells them I'm saying. Subscribe if you want the strategies the elite use, but never discuss publicly. Not because they're illegal, but because they're immoral. They work regardless of whether you're a good person. They work better if you're not constrained by being a good person. I'm building an army of people who understand that chaos isn't coming, it's already here, and it's the greatest gift you'll ever receive if you're prepared to be ruthless about extracting value from it.